Welcome back to Flow Fanatic. Today's day number 2 of 25, the 25-day Salesforce challenge, where we solve different everyday Salesforce problems with Salesforce flows. Today, we're going to be talking about tracking changes to the user object. Before we get started, just a couple quick housekeeping items. For those of you who want to sign up for notifications for the daily challenges, office hours, and solutions, go ahead and sign up here at flowfanatic.force.com. Again, that's flowfanatic.force.com. For those of you who are not familiar with Salesforce Developer Orgs, I would highly recommend that you sign up for one in conjunction with the 25-day challenge. It's a great resource. It's free. It's effectively a Salesforce org that you can set up. There's some limitations on it. You can have up to 2 users in the org, and it's effectively a playground for you guys to experiment with Salesforce flows. Lastly, I just want to make really clear the build outs that we're doing today and each and every day are not designed with your specific requirements for your organization in mind. So please know that you can take what we're doing and extend that functionality. If you want to add in additional criteria, if you want to add in additional actions, an email gets sent, something else happens, feel free to go ahead and do that. Comment, ask questions, come to office hours. That's what those are designed for. And finally, let's go ahead and jump in. So today, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about tracking changes to the user record. Why might you want to do this? Well, it's often helpful to know when a particular change was made, who made the change, what was the old value, what was the new value from an audit perspective. So today's session is going to be split into 2 separate videos, as I mentioned in the earlier session. The first video and first series is going to be around simply building the automation and the structure to track changes to the user object. The second video is going to extend that, and basically we're going to create a user experience that allows us to quickly activate and deactivate certain fields that we choose to want to track or stop tracking, okay? So just like with the core standard Salesforce functionality right now for accounts, opportunities, contacts, etc., you can go in and check those boxes. If you're not familiar with that, I'll actually just pull that up right now. So I'll show you what it looks like on the account. If we want to track changes, we can go to set history tracking. We can enable account history, and then we can specify what fields we want to track, okay? With the functionality that we're going to build, the second part of it will be kind of creating a similar user experience where we can start turning on and off fields for which we want to track. So to start off, we need to build a house. We need to build basically a structure that's going to hold this audit data, right? So when the user makes a change to a user record, when the system admin goes in and changes the person's title, we want that data to be recorded. Well, if we're going to record that data, we need a house to put that data in, or a container to put that data in. So in Salesforce, we call that a custom object. There's potentially a couple different ways to do this. We're going to be using a custom object in order to hold that data. I'm going to go ahead and click on the gear icon to get started. I'm going to click Setup. I select the Object Manager. You'll see this Create dropdown. I'm going to select that, Custom Object. And I'm just going to call this User History. Now, you could be more generic. You could use something just like history and actually use this as a container to store information, not just for changes to the user, but also changes to an account or contact. And actually, one other quick thing that I wanted to mention, the standard functionality that's available for accounts, opportunities, contacts, etc. 2 big limitations with that is you can only track up to 20 fields, and the data is only accessible via the user interface for 18 months. It's accessible for up to 24 months through the API. If you want to get around these limitations, the solution that we're going to go over today will work as well. And we'll basically bypass those things in that we're creating a completely different solution that has completely different requirements. And it's built in a way that the data will last into perpetuity. And we could track, 80 fields if we wanted. So just another application, if you do end up building something like this and you like it, know that you can extend it to other objects. And by doing that, you'll bypass those two limitations. All right. So we're creating a custom object, a container to hold user history data. We are going to come down here, and I'm just, for those of you who haven't created a custom object, when we create a custom object, every custom object has either a name or an ID field. I'm going to go ahead and change this from a name field to ID. I'm going to change it to an auto number field, so Salesforce will automatically generate this ID for us. I'm going to go ahead and specify the format and give it a starting number of 1. So the first ID will be ID -001. Go ahead and click save. All right, so next is figuring out what fields do we want to track. Okay, so when a user makes a change to the user record, what are the things that we want to store in our database? I'm going to click on fields and relationships. And then let's really just kind of quickly think about this. So for the demo today, I want to know who made the change, what user the change was made to, right? Which user record it was made to, the date that the change was made, what the old value was, what the new value was. Those are kind of the core pieces that I think about when I think about kind of auditing changes to a user record. So we're going to quickly create these 4 or 5 fields. I'll go ahead and select new. I'm going to create a text field for the old value. Give it a length of 255. I'm going to go ahead and create another text field for the new value. And a length of 255. Create another field, and this field is going to be a date field. This is going to specify the date that the change was made. And we could use date time if you want. If you want to be a little bit more specific as well, that will work. And then the last 2 fields is we're going to create 2 lookup fields, both looking to the user. One's going to be which is going to specify which user made the change. So we're going to call this changed by. And the other, we're going to store the value of which user record we're making the change to. Great. So we set up our container. Okay, so now we're ready to start putting data into that container. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to build a flow and automation that upon making an update to a record or creating a new user record, we can go ahead and basically track those changes that are made. Okay, so I'm going to come in, I'm going to click on the Home tab. Under Quick Find, I'm going to go ahead and add our flow, select flows. I'm going to click on New Flow. We have a bunch of different options. For the purposes of this demo, we're going to select record triggered flow because this is being fired based on a change creation or an update to a user record. I'll select next. We have the option to select freeform or auto layout. I love auto layout. It's super organized. It's really easy to use. It still is in the beta phase, and there are limitations on kind of what's possible with it. But for the purposes of this demo, this is what we're going to use. And I highly encourage you to try it as well. So to start out, we've initiated the record triggered flow. We've initiated the build of the record triggered flow. I'm going to go ahead and start by specifying when this trigger is going to fire. Okay, so the trigger, there's a number of different options: records created, updated, created or updated, deleted, okay? When we're thinking about this, and this is going to potentially depend on what your specific requirements are for your organization, but from my perspective, when we're tracking the full audit of what happened to certain fields on the user record, we're going to want to know the values that were set on creation and then any time they're updated. So we're going to select a record is created or updated. And then we have the option to select before save or after save. High level, there's a lot more to this, but high level, a before save record triggered flow is way more performant than an after save record triggered flow. An after save record triggered flow gives us many more tools in terms of functionality. So for instance, we can create a record in an after save record triggered flow. We can't do that in a before save. So for that purpose alone, we're going to choose after save. I'm going to click done. I'm going to go ahead and specify what object we want this flow to run off of, the user. And then under condition requirements, we're going to select none. Okay. Now, condition requirements basically say the user saves the record, right? We talked about before how we chose when is this flow going to fire. We chose created and updated. So the user either creates a record or they update a record. The flow starts to fire if, right, these condition requirements are met. For our purposes, we're going to select none here. We can always go back and refine this to include the criteria for basically all of the different events that would lead to this flow needing to be fired. But to keep things really simple and clean, we're going to select none here. All right, we're ready to go ahead and get started. So the first thing that we want to think about here is the user has gone ahead and gone and updated the record. And now what we need to do is we need to make a decision, okay? And I like to think about that decision as a traffic cop. So someone pulls up to the traffic cop, and the traffic cop's goal right now is to figure out, has a change been made to a particular user record or to this specific user record, okay? So the person gets out of the car, they show their current ID, they show their old ID, and the officer's job is to figure out, does the specific field on the new ID, is it different than the specific field on the old ID, okay? The way that we're going to build this out today is we're only going to build this functionality for one field. Okay, so in theory, if you want to track 5 fields or 10 fields, you'll need to replicate that functionality for all 10 fields. Salesforce with the new layout makes it really, really easy to basically copy elements. So it's not hard to go ahead and replicate this functionality for other fields. We're going to use the title field as the example for this demo. Okay, so the person comes to the traffic cop looks at the ID. They say, all right, the title does match, or no, the title doesn't match. If the title does match, they want to record, sorry, if the title does not match, we want to record this change on their notepad. If the title does match, we don't need to do anything at all, okay? So that traffic cop is simply a decision element. We have a bunch of different elements at our dispense. We're gonna go ahead and select decision. And we're going to name this decision. Okay, so the decision here is really, has the title changed? We can give it a description. It has the title on the user record. And now we have to specify the 2 outcomes. Okay, so one outcome is yes, it has changed. The other outcome is no, it hasn't. Go ahead and give the first one a label of title changed yes. And then we're going to specify the criteria. You can think about the criteria is, what are we going to tell the traffic cop to look for on the IDs, on both IDs, in order to determine whether or not a change has occurred. So they're going to look at the old ID, which is called record prior. They're going to look at the title field on that. And they're going to see, is this different than the title field on the new ID? Okay. The new ID is stored in a record, or in a variable called record. Again, we're going to select the title field here, right? So we're basically saying, does the prior record, meaning prior to save, the value of that record, is it different than the title field on the record variable after we've basically made that update in Salesforce, okay? So if it is, great, we're going to take one path. If it's not, Salesforce gives us a default outcome. So if none of the criteria, or if the criteria are not met here, we're automatically going to go down the default outcome path. So we don't need to set up two different outcomes, one for title changed yes, and one for title changed no. All we need is one here. Select done. We have our two paths here. I'm going to go ahead and add in our next element. So we know that if the title is changed, we want to do something in Salesforce, okay? Which brings us to our next topic of bulkification, okay? The reason we need to talk about bulkification is likely you're going to want to track more than just one field in Salesforce. And the best way that we can kind of implement a solution is utilizing all of Salesforce's best practices, and one of those is bulkification. So let's really quickly talk about bulkification. So if I were to tell you that we needed to ship a couple different packages from one address to another address, or a couple different items from one address to another address, if we think about efficiency, it's going to be a lot more efficient for us to take all three packages and put them in a big package and then bring it to the UPS store for them to ship, as opposed to bringing three individual packages and then UPS having to take one package, move it to the next address, take another package, ship it to the next address, and take the third package and ship it to the next address. So in a similar way in Salesforce, what we're going to do is, if we are creating multiple user history records, we're going to store each one of those in a separate package, and then we're going to take those packages and combine them into a larger package. And then once we've combined them into that larger package, we're going to send it all at once through UPS, or in our case, all at once to the database. So we need to start off by creating resources, variables, to hold the data that we are basically collecting about the changes that were made to the user record. Okay, so we do that by clicking on the new resource button. The resource type is going to be variable. The API name is going to be user history. Description of user history. And then for data type, we're going to select record. And the type of record is a user history record. Okay, so effectively what we did is we built that custom object called user history, and now we are basically setting up a temporary container to hold the values that we will eventually put into the database. Okay, this will make a little more sense as we start to go through this. I'm going to go ahead and click done. Okay, so now we have a single variable that will represent one record that we can put into the database. But I mentioned that whole bulkification thing where we have the small packages that we put in a larger package. So the next thing we need to do is create another resource. And this resource is going to hold a collection of boxes, or a collection of user history records. So I'm going to select variable, and I'm going to call this list of user history records. Select data type, record, and this time I'm going to select allow multiple values collection. And again, I'll enter user history here and hit done. Okay, so now I have my small box, I have my big box. Okay, so I'm ready to now take the values that I want to store and put them in the small box. So I'm going to click on this plus icon. And the way that I take my values and put them into that small box is with an assignment element. So I'm going to name this assignment element assign user history values. And I can even do assign title change user history values. For description, I'm going to say assign the values associated with the change to the title fields. All right. So now we need to just jump back about probably 15 or 20 minutes. What were all those those fields that we created? Well, let's see if we go down to the user history record. We created a field called date. We created a field called old value. We created a field called new value. We created a field called user, and then we've created a field called changed by. Okay, so right now what we're doing on the left-hand side, those are the small boxes, the containers, that temporary variable that we have set up. And then we've specified which field in that small box, which field on that record are we basically trying to change. So now we need to set those values, and that's what we're going to do through this assignment element. So the date of the change, we'll go ahead and click in here. If we scroll down, we click on flow, we can actually access the current date, which is the date of the change, right? When this flow runs, the current date is going to be equal to today. The old value, well, if we remember, we have access to the prior record, right, variable. So I can come and click in here. I can scroll down. I'll click on record prior. I'll look for the title fields. Great. Now we need to access the new value. Okay. Go ahead and click in the value box. I'll scroll down. I'll click on record, and I'll grab the title field. The last two things we need, so we need which user record this is related to. Well, we come in here and we scroll down. We know that the user record was passed to us, so we can select the record and look for the ID, and that's going to give us what user record this change was made to. And then finally, we want to store who made this change, okay? Another variable, or another item that we have access, I should say, through the flow. So if we scroll down, we can select user. Again, we can select the ID of the user, and that's going to populate who initiated this flow. So if I make the change in Salesforce, okay, to someone else's record, it's going to be my ID, my user, that gets populated in this field. All right, great. So we'll go ahead and select done. All right, now what we need to do is we need to basically add this small box into the bigger box before we ship it off to the database. So I'm going to go ahead and create another assignment element. We'll go ahead and click on the plus icon. I'll click on assignment. I'm going to say assign user history to list of user history records. All right, so we want to take the small box and put it in the big box. On the left-hand side, we're going to select the big box, which is under record collection variables. This is the variable called list of user history records. And then all we want to do is add the small box to it, which is called user history. When I select user history, if I select tab, it will go ahead and automatically complete that for me. I'll select done. I'll select save. And the naming convention that I use for flows is the name of the object, user, whether it's an after save or before save. So after save, specifying is it on create, on delete, on create and edit. In our case, it's on create and edit. And then what type of flow? So this is a record triggered flow. What this does is it really easily allows me to identify what this flow is. So I know where to basically go and access a particular, or which particular flow I need to access. I'll go ahead and click save. I'll go ahead and click activate. And I'm realizing I'm missing one step. So right now, what we've done, and just to recap, we've gone ahead and fired the trigger. The traffic cop stops the person. They get their 2 driver's licenses, the old one and the new one. They determine that the values of the title field are different between the 2 licenses. So because they're different, we're going to go down this path. If we go down this path, we're going to go ahead and the officer is going to take out their notepad and they're going to take down what was the old title, what was the new title, who made the change. It's the officer. What change was the record made to? It was the person who he stopped. And then what was the date of the change, okay? And then we're going to take that piece of paper, right, or that small box, and we're going to put it in the larger box of all the notes that we need to take back to the police station, okay? And then finally, we need to actually send that data back to the police station, right, or send that data through UPS. So we're going to go ahead and use a create record element. We're simply going to type in, we're going to call this create user history records. How many records do we want to create? Well, in our case, we're doing a collection of records. It could just be 1 record, but it could be 25 records. And because we're using that collection variable, the big box to store all this, we're going to select multiple. And then all I need to do is select the list of user history records. I'll go ahead and click done. Go ahead and save this flow. Awesome. So I'm going to come back in here and the flow should be working now and ready to go. The one thing that we still need to do is we need to add the related list to the people tab or to the people page, okay, in order for us to be able to see the changes that are being made and recorded. So in order to do that, I am going to go ahead and click on the 9 dots. I'm going to search for people. Okay, I'm going to click on my name. People is basically another tab that you can use to access user data through the end user experience. When I say end user experience, it's what your end users see. The back end, or kind of the admin side, is all accessed through this gear icon setup. Okay, so we can always make updates on the back end to the user record, but we can also make certain updates on the front end to the user record. And that's how we're going to do that here. So we need to add this related list on the screen. We're going to click the gear icon. We're going to click edit page. And we are going to come over here to search. We're going to type in single related list. I'm going to drag this related list onto the page. And then I'm going to specify you know what, sorry, I need to, I'm first going to actually add that related list to the page layout. So I'm going to click on user profile layout. I'm going to click on related lists. And I'm going to select user history user, not user history changed by, because we want to see the changes that were made to the user on the user's page, as opposed to the changes that were made to the, basically who changed the record. So if you remember, we had 2 different lookup fields, one which was a lookup for who made the change, and one was a lookup for which user record we made the change to. We want the one called user history user. I'll go ahead and click save. Come back here. I'll just quickly refresh this. Go ahead and type in single again, drag that over here. So ignore that. We are actually going to use the related list component over here, it looks like single related lists are not available on the people tab. I'll go ahead and click save. We'll go ahead and click the back button. All right, and now I'm going to scroll down and we can see our new related list, user history user, that has 0 records. Okay, so we're going to click on edit. And we are ready to come in and make the change. Okay, so we find out that Alex is no longer the CFO. He actually got promoted to CEO. We're going to make that change. We're going to click save. And now if we scroll down, we can see a history record, an audit record that was created. Now, obviously, this is not very helpful. It's just showing us the ID. It's not showing us any of the fields that were changed. For those of you who know how to make these changes, go off on your own and figure it out. But I'll also go ahead and walk through that really quickly right now. So I can come back and I can click the gear icon. I can click edit object. I can click user profile page layout, user profile layout. I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to click on this wrench. I'm going to actually go ahead and remove the ID. And instead, I'm going to add the date, the old value, the new value, and who it was changed by. I'll go ahead and click save. Now I can go back to the record, refresh that record. And I can see the change that I just made, right? So on 4/14, I made an update. Alex Fram-Schwartz made an update from the from the title field with the old value of CFO and the new value of CEO. Now I'm realizing one thing that I forgot to add in here was that I had on the original demo was we actually created another field that tracked what fields we were making the change to. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly add that in. In order to do that, I'm going to come back to the object manager. I'm going to go ahead and look up the user history object that we created. I'm going to add in one more field, a text field called field. Okay, and this is going to be, I'm going to set it to 15 characters. This is going to be what fields are we making the change to. So now that we've created the fields, we're going to come back to the flow. Scroll down, I'll select user after save on create and edit, record triggered flow. Okay, and now we need to go and assign that value. So you may remember assign the title change user history values. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create one more assignment, which is user history fields. And we want to say it's the title field that we're making the update to. Go ahead and click done. I'll click save as, click save, I'll click activate. Let me come back to the record and make one more change. So he now gets promoted from CEO to president. Click save. Great. So both of those changes were tracked. If I come in here and click on edit, I'll be able to see that the title, right, which field that was changed is currently being stored as well successfully. And if we do want to go ahead and add the name of the field as part of this related list, you can follow the steps from before and just add in the title field, or sorry, add in the fields. All right, great. So that's it. The functionality is working. In the next video series, we're going to talk about how to create a user interface or user experience that allows us to basically quickly turn on and off these different fields for tracking purposes.